Remember, 9/11 was an inside job. The UN is corrupt.
How do you sell tickets to an event to listen to a mass murderer speak?
There are those now in leadership positions who have been traditionally and historically quite critical of the United Nations. And that will undoubtedly create a more challenging budgetary environment than is already the case. But I'm confident that, as has been the case in the past, we have fully funded our obligations to the United Nations in a bipartisan fashion through Congress over the last few years.
We are all under constant surveillance. See something, say something.
We're gonna invade the world. Yes, we can put sanctions on Iran. Yes, we can. Economic sanctions are an indiscriminate killing weapon that targets children.
500,000 Iraqi children were murdered by the sanctions under Clinton. Madeleine Albright said the cost was worth it. It was just fine.
Susan Rice!
Sanctions are nice!
Susan Rice! Sanctions are nice! Susan Rice! Sanctions are nice! Susan Rice! Sanctions are nice!
My name is Stephen Wilford. You spoke beautifully about the role of the United Nations to ensure peace and resolve conflicts. But when it comes to Israel, what I heard you say is that the UN should be hands-off. Given your administration and your statements on the legitimacy of continued Israeli settlements, the illegitimacy of continued Israeli settlements, will you then support, or maybe more to the point, will you not veto the resolution now pending before the Security Council condemning the settlements as a, quote, major obstacle to the achievement of a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace?
Well, as you can imagine, this is a topical issue in New York. And the United States has taken, as you pointed out, very consistently, not only in this administration, but in previous administrations, the view that continued Israeli settlement activity is illegitimate and should be halted. We also believe very strongly that, as I said in my remarks, that final status issues, those issues that are at the core of what divides Israelis and Palestinians, can't be determined or litigated in the Security Council or the General Assembly. They may provide comfort and satisfaction to one or other parties at the time, but the fact is they can't be negotiated and therefore finally and fully resolved in that venue. And what happens when we get into these kinds of debates is that they end up being even more polarizing and complicate efforts to bring the parties back to the table. No one is more committed outside of the Palestinians and the Israelis and the parties to the conflict to resolving it than President Obama and this administration. On the second day that he came to office, he put Senator George Mitchell in charge as his special envoy. And he did that because he understands of the critical importance to the United States, and indeed to Israelis and Palestinians, of resolving this conflict through two states living side by side in peace and security. But there is no way to accomplish that without the parties returning to direct negotiations and agreeing themselves on these core final status issues. And we have not found it to facilitate that process by trying to prejudge them in the context of UN declarations.
So the answer to the question is you do not support the resolution?
I've answered the question. Thank you.
So the answer to the question is you do not support the resolution?
I've answered the question.
bailout, inside job,
Susan Rice wanted a welcome.
bailout,
This is her welcome.
job, Wall Street bailout, inside job, Wall Street bailout.
How can you pay to see someone
Inside
speak
job.
that helped kill 500,000 Iraqi babies?
Susan Rice, sanctions not nice. Susan Rice, sanctions not nice. Susan Rice, sanctions not nice.
Susan Rice!
Sanctions aren't nice.
Right now, somewhere in a hospital in some other country filled with people that aren't like you, that don't look like you, there are children dying in hospitals because of UN sanctions, because they can't get the medication they need, because they can't get the life support that they need. How is that right? How is it right to spend money to listen to someone who talks that helped kill 500,000 Iraqi babies? How is that right? How is that right to meet in a church and talk about it? Listen to this woman talk about things like this. Have you ever heard of thou shalt not kill? I think it's in the Decalogue. Maybe you should look it up. It's in the Bible.
Actually, give them Matthew 24. Don't be deceived.
At the core of what divides Israelis and Palestinians can't be determined or litigated in the Security Council or the General Assembly. They may provide comfort and satisfaction to one or other parties at the time, but the fact is they can't be negotiated and therefore finally and fully resolved in that venue. The truth is, the UN has also picked up some bad habits along the way. And we must continue to be clear about its shortcomings. You hear a lot of criticism of the UN from some quarters. And I confess, I agree with some of it. In the past 2 years, with US leadership, the Security Council imposed the toughest sanctions that Iran and North Korea have ever faced. Strong Security Council resolutions have provided a foundation for others, from the European Union to Canada to South Korea, to levy additional sanctions of their own. And they warned governments that would defy their international obligations, that they too will face isolation. In the past 2 years, with US leadership, the Security Council imposed the toughest sanctions